of the interesting aspects of riffing with Aniverse is the introduction of shows that I would never watch willingly. So when this show was slated to be one of our first shows to riff, I was interested. Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, just one of the many sitcom to cartoon adaptations of the late 70s and early 80s, is seen by many to be one of the worst cartoons put out by Hanna-Barbera, in a time when many of their outputs were either weak Scooby-Doo follow-ups or cartoons farmed out to their Australian branch that only last one season. But is this hatred justified? What caused this show to become so hated? Let's start at the beginning, shall we?
Sunday, Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy.
Starting out as a segment of the anthology series Love American Style, Happy Days would become one of the most popular sitcoms of the 1970s. The show follows the life of one Richie Cunningham, his family, and his friends Ralph Malph and Potsy Weber. Oh, and this guy.
I'm gonna pop you one so you'll stop playing games.
Over the course of 10 years, this show would endure cast changes and departures, shark jumping, Fonzie mania, and spin-off after spin-off. But things got even more interesting when Hanna-Barbera picked up the rights for an animated adaptation. It, along with animated adaptations of fellow spin-offs Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy, formed a trilogy of cartoons that no one really asked for. The main synopsis of Fonz and the Happy Days Gang goes as follows. One day, a time machine materializes in front of Arnold's. Said time machine belongs to Cupcake, a magical girl from the 25th century. Her time machine is broken, and, as you'd expect, Fonz is there to help fix it. Unfortunately, an accident causes them to fall into a time warp, and now they're traveling through time in order to make it back to 1957 Milwaukee. Will they ever make it back home? It's a cartoon from the early 80s. What do you expect? The one thing that many people assume about Fonz and the Happy Days Gang is the notion that it started life out as an adaptation of Doctor Who, with Cupcake and Mr. Cool as stand-ins for the Doctor and K9 respectively. Heck, the Time Machine's interior looks very similar to that of the TARDIS. Even to this day, some still accept this rumor as fact.
Did you know that this series was created because Hanna-Barbera couldn't get the rights to Doctor Who? Yeah, this is the closest thing to an animated Doctor Who series we got.
Even Wikipedia still claims this to be true. But then again, the page really isn't all that up to snuff, so I'm not surprised. However, I'm here to tell you that this is not the case. According to writer and developer Dwayne Poole, the show was meant to be a Happy Days cartoon from the very beginning. The time travel aspect was their way of differentiating from Happy Days as much as they could. Poole even stated that he wasn't even sure if either Joe Barbera or William Hanna had even heard of Doctor Who in the first place. However, there is some truth to this rumor. An animated Doctor Who series was in development at some point, but it wasn't done by Hanna-Barbera. It was actually done by Nelvana. To make a long story short, in 1990, the BBC approached Nelvana to make an animated continuation of the show, which was cancelled the previous year. The intent was to cut costs and have plots that couldn't be done at the time with live action. However, an unnamed British animation studio coerced the Beeb to let them do it, claiming they could do it at a much cheaper price. Either way, nothing came of it, and the series pressed on in book form. Well, save for that really bad Children in Need special. And the TV movie. Anyways, I'm getting off track. Back to Fonz. As with any Hanna-Barbera show, the show was very formulaic. Episodes typically go as follows. Cupcake claims their next stop will be 1957 Milwaukee.
Stand by, everybody! Next stop, Milwaukee, 1957.
Some sort of incident occurs that causes them to unknowingly veer off course.
Cosmic calamities! We're stuck between times!
Everyone looks outside to see where the time machine took them.
Milwaukee, we're home!
If this is Milwaukee, it's no neighborhood I've ever seen before.
Cupcake reveals where they are via her watch.
According to my time band, we're in ancient Egypt.
The gang meets up with a woman that will eventually become Fonzie's love interest.
Runaway barge! I'm gonna crash into that wall!
The time machine becomes inaccessible in some way, shape, or form. The villain of the week is introduced.
Good evening.
The plot of the episode is set up by the love interest of the week.
My uncle sailed off to find the treasure, but he never came back. So I took my copy of the map and went looking for him.
And found Blackbeard instead.
Mr. Cool does something stupid that gets them in trouble.
What was that?
Probably just the wind.
One or more of the characters get captured by the main villain.
I mean, we may be giving up everything.
Said characters get rescued, or if Fonzie is one of the group that gets captured, escapes with a snap of his fingers.
Way to go!
More hijinks ensue.
Food craters.
Whoops. Sorry, Ralph.
The gang reunites and goes up against the villain of the week.
Your walking first aid kit is already in my reach.
The villain gets their comeuppance. Fonzie gets some action from the love interest of the week. And finally, the gang departs in the time machine, with Cupcake claiming she'll get them to 1957 Milwaukee next time.
1957, here we come. This time for sure.
So with such a formula in place, is it really as bad as everyone makes it out to be? Well, kinda. The main issue is just how formulaic things can get. Throughout our time riffing the show, I was guessing what would happen with remarkable accuracy. It was that predictable. There was only so many times I could watch these characters get captured, or see Mr. Cool receiving amusing injuries, or noticing how many times Cupcake's magic failed, or counting how many times this shot appeared. Also an issue is the multiple animation errors. Like, look at this! And that! And that! I mean, really? I know this was farmed out to Australia, but come on! This is the kind of stuff I'd see from Dingo Pictures.
Macht nicht Lärm und nicht Gestank, braucht nicht Motor oder Tank, auch nicht Funkgerät und Tower. Wer Teppich fliegt, ist einfach schlauer.
But with all that being said, are there any good aspects to this show? Like, at all? Can this be salvaged? Well, thankfully, there is. For such a silly premise, the cast does a pretty good job of the material given to them.
Oh, come on, Ralph. Remember Milwaukee, huh? Arnold's Cheeseburgers? Janet Blanchard? Aha! At least there's hope.
Henry Winkler, Ron Howard, and Don Most all reprise their roles for this cartoon. And Didi Conn, Frenchie from Grease, voices Cupcake, and the god of voice acting himself, Frank Welker, plays Mr. Cool.
Do you really think that could get us back on course?
The ensemble cast included Don Messick, the original voice of Scooby-Doo, Kenneth Mars, Amanda McBroom, and Susan Silo. So, Hanna-Barbera didn't skimp out on casting extras. Despite the repetitiveness of the series, there were at least a few standout episodes for me. Now, quick disclaimer, I have not seen the entire series. The initial plan was to annotate Season 1, then pick up Season 2 much later if we were still interested. However, as we were annotating the 10th episode, Bry's stash of the entire series was taken down by CBS. At least we think it's CBS. With YouTube's system, it's hard to tell if it's the real deal or not. As such, I've only seen the first 10 episodes. I wish I saw the rest, but I don't have legal access to the series at the moment.
We now return with Fonz and the Happy Days gang.
What's interesting about this episode is that it somewhat breaks the formula a bit by having an actual mystery involved, as if this was an episode of Scooby-Doo or something. The gang finds themselves in the middle of the Salem witch trials, and sure enough, there's a witch on the loose, one that lures ships to their demise in the local harbor. All that is, except for one. Not only is this episode decently paced, it's got a few instances of really smooth and possibly rotoscoped animation, something that you rarely see from animated shows on television at the time. Even Mr. Cool gets a few moments to shine. But what might be my favorite part of this whole thing is the fact that Fonzie is willing to mess up the space-time continuum just to bring Elizabeth, his love interest for the episode, along with him in order to save her from being hung.
You've got to come with us, Elizabeth. You're in danger here.
But this is my home, Fonzie. I cannot leave.
This is the only time, to my knowledge, that he'd be willing to do such a thing, and it shows that he really is a ladies' man and does care for them. The second episode I really want to quickly mention is Bye Bye Blackbeard. Not only does Richie get a few moments of quick thinking,
Have you guys seen Pinocchio? They all got out of a whale by building a fire.
I get it. The smoke got the well to sneeze them out.
but he's the one that gets the love interest this episode, not Fonzie.
Kind of funny, Fon. How this time I got the girl.
Yeah, right you are, Richie, eh?
Now, let's talk characters. For the most part, the Happy Days cast retain their characteristics from the original show. Fonzie's the ace that can practically do no wrong, Richie's the everyman that's along for the ride, and Ralph's the butt monkey joker that tends to get the short end of the stick. Cupcake is... well, she seems to have this lust for Fonzie. Whenever another girl enters the picture, she gets thirsty.
He's wonderful. He's mine. You're horny as hell.
Honestly, her best moments come from her trying to keep her stake on Fonzie. Alright, I've been putting it off long enough. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Mr. Cool. I'm definitely in the minority here, but I don't think Mr. Cool is that bad, to be honest. Yes, he can get annoying. Yes, he screws up a lot. Yes, he has been compared to Scrappy Doo on occasion. But despite all that, I actually find him to be kind of cute.
Huh? Huh? Huh?
Reggie, hey, Paula. Hiya, men's wondering.
Call me crazy, but I've seen more annoying characters. Looking at you, Victor and Monty. Mr. Cool is essentially Fonzie's protege, in a sense. He's trying to be like his owner, even if he fails spectacularly. But even when he's at his most annoying, Fonzie still has patience with him and rarely speaks negatively about him. He may be a screw-up, but he's Fonzie's screw-up. The show lasted 2 seasons, lasting from 1980 to 1981. By this point in Happy Days' life, it had already jumped the shark, and both Howard and Most had departed the show. So it was nearing the beginning of the end, and having an animated show like this probably didn't help matters. What surprises me is the fact that even though Richie and Ralph had been written out by this point, they still signed on to do this cartoon when they could have easily added Chachi to the cast. After the show's end, both Fonzie and Mr. Cool were added to the show's sister series, Laverne and Shirley in the Army. To quickly sum up this show, it was based on a 2-parter in Season 5 where the girls enlist in the Army. From what little I've seen of this show, mainly because of the poor quality of the episodes online, it's just as insane, if not more insane, than Fonz and the Happy Days gang. Apparently there were plans to have them remain in the Army for a few seasons, but it was dropped, and this cartoon was a bit of a what-if scenario. Don't quote me on that, though. Finding information like this is sketchy at best. Anyways, this new version, called Laverne and Shirley with the Fonz, was part of a sort of power hour with a Mork and Mindy cartoon. Because if we're going to make cartoon versions of Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, we might as well bring Mork along for the ride as well. And yes, Robin Williams did reprise his role. This version only lasted 8 episodes before being reran for the rest of Mork's run, which ended in 1983, a year before Happy Days itself would end. I'd hesitate to call Fonz and the Happy Days gang a terrible show. While the whole thing reeks of cash grab, there's a certain charm to it. Of the episodes I've watched, I had a blast riffing them. It's the kind of insanity that only the early 80s could bring. Time travel, magical girls, a little bit of education thrown in when you factor in the historical figures the gang meets. It's all one pretty insane package. Like I said earlier, CBS, or someone pretending to be CBS, took down the entire show from YouTube, which coincidentally was uploaded by one of us. Whoops. As such, I can't really say, if you're interested, give it a watch. Yes, I know the full series is on other sites, but unless you have the beefiest of ad-blocking software, I wouldn't risk the porn ads. But if you do, give this show a chance. Get a few friends together, maybe smoke a bowl, and watch to your heart's content. It definitely isn't the worst cartoon ever made.